doesn't mean that society isn't still, like, by and large, fairly transphobic and fairly anti-LGBT.
What? Can I ask you a question real quick? What does transphobic mean, right?
Great question. When I say transphobic, with the same approach that I would say like racist or sexist. So when I say these things, I don't mean
biased.
Like these people aren't like literally, hateful bigots that like want to fucking like gay bash or whatever. It starts at like microaggressions. That shit
you
exists.
Just mean bias,
and it has an impact.
Right?
Well, that shit, yeah, it's just like very like small biases. As like weird as it sounds to say, I personally think it's like all right level of racism to engage with.
Yeah, but what do you mean by racism? How's that defined? Is what I'm asking.
Well, what I mean by racism is essentially just participating in behavior that, by and large, contributes to social issues, like social ills, I guess.
Well, that doesn't.
For example,
that doesn't have anything to do with race, though. That's just kind of like you would say activism or something. You see what I mean? Like your definition you gave of racism didn't include anything about race in it.
Well, I mean, it's generally like any behavior that would contribute to like
social unrest. But that doesn't have anything to do with racism.
Well, okay, so any behavior that contributes to, like,
racial unrest, maybe.
Wait, let me quickly translate some words because I have some words.
Just how I talk.
Stop.
You talking over me, telling him that this is how I talk is not helping. It's just making it seem like it's a lot worse.
Oh, geez.
I'm just telling him that this is no. There's no need to be doing that over me talking.
Chill.
Because
So when you, for example, call a black person the N-word, that's racist, like regardless.
Sure. But your definition earlier didn't encompass anything to do with race. It just said causing a social unrest.
No. You filled that blank in. Like I don't have like a perfectly working definition of these things, but.
Well, doesn't your definition need to encompass race in some way to even be coherent as a racist definition?
Well, yeah, obviously, generally, engaging in behavior that is to the detriment, that contributes to a zeitgeist, where like one race is, I don't know how you would describe it, contributes to a zeitgeist where try to agree upon a definition of racism. I think that's very, very that's not a useful way to engage with the topic.
Well, the reason why is because people can be sophist, right? And they can say, you're being racist, and you say, what do you mean by that? Because all I did was this, and then you go, yeah, well, my definition isn't rigid to meaning one thing, so this can be racism in this case or something. It's like, well, hold on, that's pretty slippery, you know?
It's generally accepted that when you say something like homophobia, you're not referring to people being afraid of gay people. You're generally referring to being hateful of gay people. That's been the case for the past, I don't even know, 15 years now.
What was it? It's not that you're afraid. It's what?
Averse.
Generally being engaging in hateful behavior towards gay people.
A lot of people say that Milo Yiannopoulos is homophobic, right?
Yes,
and by that you mean that he's adverse to gay people, but then he...
No, by that I mean he's engaging in behavior that's
hateful toward them.
That ultimately contributes to a society that's
See, that's what I mean. It just changed. Your definition just changed.
So does the homophobia have to have the hate element? Or can it just be something like you avoid gay people? Can I walk away?
It's not.
I gave this definition very early on, so I don't know why this got lost.
I wrote down what you said. Hate.
Because I ignore the words and just engage with the I'm trying to conceptualize this because again, working definitions are really hard, and I don't think they're very useful for conversations about these topics.
I think they're the most important.
Yeah. Yes, that is exactly.
It's just inconsistent.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, it's inconsistent.
Because I'm tired of people thinking that consistency is the be-all end-all. I have never once met a person that is consistent. I am so tired of people being like, you have to be consistent. No, you don't, because nobody fucking is.
What's up, you guys? I really appreciate the support I've been getting. I noticed a lot of the same people in the comment sections and sharing my content. I really appreciate it. My channel is kind of a low budget and lazy channel. But that's really just because I work full time. I have a lot of projects going on, newborn baby, you name it. So I'm really trying to dedicate some time to this, just to add some value, and I hope to do that. I'm starting a series now of Discord conversations I've had. I probably have 30, 40, 50, something like that of them saved up. Some of them 2 hours long, some of them 7, 8 hours long, 10 hours long, where I just go in Discord rooms and talk to nothing but people that disagree with me and see if I can change their minds. I think it's going to help improve the conversations. Let me know if you agree. I think that this will definitely be valuable to some people. And so we're going to start with a 7-hour conversation I had, and I'm going to break it into increments.
Now, I'll probably be interpreted as some type of right-wing shill, but be that as it may, I wanted to protect the people in this recording, so I blurred their faces. The reason for that is, I mean, as leftists, they said a lot of odd things. Like, one guy said he thinks it's acceptable to say the N-word in private. And while I do have a recording role on Discord, I don't want people to be afraid to have conversations with me on there. So let's start with hour 1 of the 7-hour stream. And sorry about the audio issues.
Would you still accept that statement, or would you say that'd still be transphobic?
Well, if you want to have like I'm not approaching like conversation with people as like academic debates. Generally, when people say shit like that, they don't want to engage in in academic debates. They don't postulate these statements as arguments. They postulate these statements as this is what I feel is true. That's why I'm going to say it. And I don't think trans people like deserve to, be treated as the gender that they identify as. That's generally just the sentiment that comes out of these statements. If you want to like have an academic discussion about this, then yes, of course, like the engagement with that topic and the engagement with these statements is like vastly different on my end, and it's going to be vastly different from like any LGBT person or like any intellectually honest LGBT person. It's gonna
be a little bit hard in the Destiny.GG server. You've got a lot of discussions that happen based on just strictly talking about the story element, the emotion, more or less the hypotheticals, the morals versus morals, ethicals, philosophical, ideological, but nothing in terms of like the pronunciation of here are my points and this is my deductive argument. That doesn't exist. That doesn't seem to be something that is used here.
What?
Okay, but like that's not what I'm talking about.
Really that here. Usually you bring up a point and people argue about it until the very end, where everyone's just like, all right, well we've gone off topic so much to this point that I have no idea where we started.
My original point is just just like to hammer this home. So the reason that I'm interested in like LGBT rights and I'm interested in like preserving and pushing LGBT rights and especially like interested in not regressing on that end is because like this is like a fucking argument Destiny makes all the time about like racism. Just because there's not a law that says trans people don't like get to do a certain thing, or like gay people don't get to like do a certain thing, that doesn't mean that society isn't still like by and large fairly transphobic and fairly anti-LGBT.
What can I ask you a question real quick? What does transphobic mean, right? Because it's not in like a manual with the other phobics.
No.
I'm just
That's
wondering.
a great question.
Yeah.
When I say transphobic with the same approach that I would say like racist or sexist. So when I say these things, I don't mean
biased.
Like these people aren't like literally, hateful bigots that like want to fucking like gay bash or whatever. These are just essentially what I'm boiling this down to is it starts at like microaggressions, and I don't know how many people are gonna get fucking triggered at me using that word, but like
microaggressions.
That shit
you
exists.
Just mean bias,
has an impact.
Right?
Well, that shit, it's just like very like small biases, and generally when I say transphobic, I mean that like on the smallest, like from the smallest scale, like starting at like very minute things such as whether intentionally, like usually intentionally misgendering a person because you just don't buy into it. That's a very subtle thing that's generally transphobic. That's a very, very like small level of transphobia. But
let me say,
already like transphobia, for example.
Yeah, I consider myself kind of. I hate to be like edgy or like trendy and be like I'm centrist or whatever, right? But like, I do consider myself kind of closer to the center. But my problem with a lot of people on the left is terminology, and here's what I mean by that is let me just give you a couple examples and you can respond, right?
Yeah.
So like, the biggest thing in philosophy, right, is to have a good conversation with people you disagree with, is to define your terms up front, right? That way we're not making any mistakes. And a big problem with conversations in politics is the equivocation. So, for example, when two people are debating about racism, if they just sat down to define their terms, they'd realize they're not saying the same thing. One is defining racism as prejudice plus power, which the other side just thinks that's just prejudice of race. And then the other says, oh, no, has nothing to do with power. It's just that if you think your race is superior to another, or you treat people different because of the color they are, or whatever. Same thing with like transphobic and homophobic and things like that. Whenever they put the phobia on there, it leads one to think that it's like the other phobias, an actual diagnosed thing, but it's not in any of the manuals. So then you have to ask each individual what they think it means. And then I can give you obviously like a lot more.
What manual are we talking about?
Like the DSM-5. DSM-5.
Okay, so, this is like
it's homophobia in that one.
No, neither of those are.
So if I were to like define like racism, sexism, blah blah blah, whatever. So when I say these things, I'm probably like gonna get a lot of shit like for this, but this is generally like how I engage with these things, because I think this is the conclusion that I've come to. This is like the healthiest way to engage with these things. So something everybody has probably done in their lifetime is just racism. Racism can start very small and can get very big. It's all about the level of racism you're comfortable engaging with. It's all about the level of racism that's contextual. So for example, Destiny saying the N-word in private is racist. I personally think it's, as like weird as it sounds to say, I personally think it's like an all right level of racism to engage with. I think you just have to be aware that whenever you're doing these things, that yes.
Yeah, but what do you mean by racism? How's that defined? Is what I'm asking.
Well, what I mean by racism is essentially just participating in behavior that, by and large, contributes to social issue, social ills, I guess.
Well, that
so
doesn't.
For example,
that doesn't have anything to do with race, though. That's just kind of like would say activism or something.
Okay, so if you want to get really bogged down into this, saying the N-word in private, for example.
No, I need something that I can apply across the board. So causing social unrest or something like that, or contributing to it. I mean, I could just say activism is the same thing or something. You know what I mean?
Okay, so I'm just okay, this is just for example, saying the N-word in private, right?
I agree with you on that. That's not
just
right.
percentage-wise, all right? Just percentage-wise, all right? So if you say the N-word in private and you're okay with that, just hypothetically, just percentage-wise, that has the chance of spilling over into the real world. And
sure, I agree with that.
Even if by Google 0.01% chance of increasing the racism that exists, the racist behavior that exists in the world, you have engaged in racism, even if it's on the smallest, most infinitesimal still.
Right,
so
but you said the average person. You said that everybody engages in racism in their life. So I'm wondering, how is that possible? And then it's if they do an average thing, for example, somebody might buy a tan Band-Aid instead of a dark Band-Aid or something like that. It's and if you consider that to be contributing to racism, it's where does it end at, and how are they culpable for something they didn't intend, right?
No, look again,
you're talking about systematic racism, not just racism.
My point is,
versus Mavro is talking about racism in general.
I'm talking about specifically. Look, again, I'll repeat this. It's generally also just about the level of racism you're number one comfortable engaging with. We're never gonna get rid of social ills. That's also something that I'm just convinced of. It's all about bringing these things down to a level that we're comfortable with. For example, we are very okay with, I don't know, among friends talking shit to each other. Why is that? Why is it okay to among friends insult each other and not okay to do
because
it
intention. You know what your friends' intentions are.
Well, yes, but
People
generally,
in
like,
politics assume your intentions.
well, yes, I agree, but like that's just like a piece of the puzzle, right? Generally, we accept these things because we're okay with engaging we're okay with engaging in hateful speech amongst our peers because that's a level where we're comfortable with that. We don't want that like on a societal scale, but we've managed to like make it out like amongst ourselves where we generally like don't just insult random strangers like on the street because that's just like a social contract we've managed to work out amongst each other. Racism and transphobia and whatever, like I would say works in kind of the same way, where we just want to bring it down to a level where we're comfortable with it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is you're saying we want to bring down racism, we want to bring down transphobia and these things. But I'm like, we have to first know what they are. You see what I mean? Like your definition you gave of racism didn't include anything about race in it.
Well, I mean, it's it's generally like any behavior that would contribute to like
social unrest. But that doesn't have anything to do with racism.
Well, okay, so any behavior that contributes to, like, you know,
racial unrest, maybe.
Wait, let me quickly translate some words because I have some words.
I'm not like trying to catch you or anything. I just the definitions are the most important thing to me. That's my biggest problem with the left is just that I need to know what they mean, right? Because like when I hear transphobic, I go to look it up and like because it has the term phobic, which is a clinical or medical phobia,
that's untrue.
Right? What was that?
No, it's not.
That's untrue.
Phobia is not.
Phobia is not a.
You're at that point, okay.
Phobia is just a Latin word for fear or aversion to something.
Yeah, but
so you can have a phobia of food that tastes like Jello. Like that doesn't mean you're afraid of that food. You have an aversion to it.
Wait.
Transphobia, homophobia, all of those types of things actually refer to the aversion to being averse to gay or trans people.
So phobia, as used in the English language, I don't know of any cases.
What phobia is.
Right. Well, hold on. Wait. You go to. Are you guys familiar with the etymological fallacy?
But the thing is, we use phobia in both these ways. You're literally bringing up examples like homophobia and transphobia, where phobia is being used currently in the English language to refer to the aversion of something.
Right. I agree. There are multiple usages of terms, right? And
okay, so
no, I'm not using it as inversion. No, I'm not using it as inversion. I'm using it.
That's what phobia in that word
means.
Wait
a second, because we're not communicating. Because you're just trying to talk as loud as you can to slow down the conversation.
Oh no, I just always talk loud.
Okay, that's fine. But
you don't have to be like that. What the fuck?
All I'm trying to do is get definitions.
All I'm trying to do is you talk so loud.
You're you see how you're butthurt about this?
You don't
just
have to
relax.
throw insults.
Okay.
You're getting butthurt.
Insults like that. What the fuck?
That's not an insult. Just you're.
Yeah, but there's no.
We were having a normal conversation until you came in.
Why are you coming at me?
I'm not. We're having a normal conversation.
Anyone that's spoken to me before knows that this is just my speaking voice.
Okay, then chill.
I know that to you it might seem like I'm uncalm or unwell or like.
Okay, that's fine.
It's just how I talk.
It's fine.
You talking over me, telling him that this is how I talk is not helping. It's just making it seem like it's a lot worse. I'm just telling him that this is no. There's no need to be doing that over me talking.
Chill.
Because you're literally both of them talked over me the entire time I was trying to clarify.
Well, we were in the middle of a conversation, and you jump in and you're like, you're using it the wrong way.
Conversation in a public Discord.
That's fine too. That's why I didn't say anything you couldn't.
If you two want to go have a private conversation with each other, then you can.
I didn't say you couldn't.
Yes, and then
you're just
talking
acting
over me while I'm
about
trying to explain to you that this is just this is actually just how I speak.
Okay.
Like straight up.
I get it.
Anyone that's ever spoken to me before knows
That's
this.
Fine.
You don't have to say I get it. You talked over me while I was trying to say it, and then what? You can't just say you get it while talking over me. Like that's not how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, let you finish. Like
no, I said I would let you finish.
Okay. I thought you said let me finish. I was like, come on.
Being uncharitable.
Okay, I just want to. I was still not like getting to like the root of my point. Okay, so and by the way, so are you okay? So when you say like transphobia or homophobia implies like a fear of something, so like you're not on the page of like homophobia, just like literally meaning like being hateful towards gay people.
See, that's what I'm saying. You guys don't even mean the same thing by it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so generally, like I don't want to like get too bogged down on semantics, but like
well, that's what one is to figure out what it means.
These are behaviors that you engage in. All right, it's the same with like racism. These are like behaviors that you engage in, that you can't. Again, like it's multifaceted, right? Racism isn't like one thing, and it's like there's like one definition to go by. It's generally like when I'm talking about racism and sexism and stuff like that, I'm generally talking about it being on an interpersonal level. All right, so in a level between like two people engage, like interacting. That's generally what I'm talking about. So when you, for example, call a black person the N-word, that's racist, like regardless.
Sure. But your definition earlier didn't encompass anything to do with race. It just said causing a social unrest.
No. That's you filled that blank in. So I don't mean to like say causing social unrest. I just mean to like contributing to like the overarching, sort of zeitgeist of
social unrest, or
not social unrest.
What? Like you need the final piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, you gotta somehow that's got to connect from social problems to race in order for it to be racism. You get what I'm saying? Or else it's just like bias or prejudice or some other type of like
no,
activism.
That's generally like not how I engage with these things, because that usually leads me to that has led me in the past to like engage in behavior that I'm not comfortable with anymore. For example, like just overall like racist behavior, or like back in like my teenage days, I also like had this same idea that like racism is like a very rigid sort of construct, and that led me to being kind of racist a lot of the time, and being like very hateful towards people that like were brown, that these like sort of processes were generally unconscious. Again, like I don't have like a perfectly working definition of these things, but
well, doesn't your definition need to encompass race in some way to even be coherent as a racist definition?
Well, yeah, like obviously, like generally, like engaging in behavior that like is like to the detriment, like that contributes to a zeitgeist, where like one race is, I don't know how you would like describe it, like.
Well, the average, the thing that I think happens with, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like contributes to like a zeitgeist where one race is like either demeaned in some way, or another race is like lifted above the other races in some way. That's generally like, I don't know if that's a very vague definition, but again, like these behaviors can be like very vague and very like subtle. Again, like racism doesn't have to be like shouting the N-word. Like,
sure, no, I agree with that, but there are like 4 basic definitions that I know, right? And I think what happens, and what I was saying earlier, the reason why this like slows down conversations is because people don't define their terms up front. And are you familiar with what an equivocation is?
Yes, but okay, right? so let me just respond like directly to your point, where you said like there's 4 working definitions. So the problem with those like definitions are definitions of things like racism and these very like complex sociological like things that exist in the real world are very often either like too limiting or too rigid, or don't completely like cover like every aspect.
Have you been reading Foucault by chance? Just wondering.
No.
Okay, never mind.
It's like just a conclusion that I've come to through like my personal experiences.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, like that's so generally like when you try to agree upon a definition of racism, I think that's very, very like that's not a useful way to engage with the topic.
Well, the reason why is because people can be sophist, right? And they can say, "You're being racist," and you say, "What do you mean by that?" Because all I did was this, and then you go, "Yeah, well, my definition isn't rigid to like meaning one thing, so this can be racism in this case or something." It's like, well, hold on, that's pretty slippery,
Okay, so just to use like the real world example of like racism towards black people in America, I don't know if you like believe that that's the case, or
what's the case? That people are racist?
Yeah, like that there were like a lot of like racist people in America, like specifically racist towards black people.
Part of the world, yeah, of course.
Well,
no, but I just mean
in that
example.
In that very equation, bro, this is where I would then have to throw this back onto you. Do you believe that there is a possibility of heterophobia?
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, you're just talking about the possibility, right? Like,
nope. There already is.
Well, I mean, okay, so again, these things are like very complex. Generally, we don't look at like
it's a very small number, but it exists right now.
Yeah, no, but okay, so what I'm trying to get at is like we don't look at these things as like, you know, we don't define racism and then judge people like based on that definition. Generally, we look at like specific behaviors and specific context, and then determine is that behavior racist or not, and that's what we go by. We don't go by like we don't have a like just a checklist of things that like are racism, and then
it's different when you're making
yes, we do.
It's different when you're making an argument.
Yeah,
if you're making an argument, you have to have like you have a contention, and you have to define the words in your contention. That's how you like structure.
Yeah, that's like, kind of my main point, because let me give you one example real quick. I think this will clear it up for you real quick.
Or whatever.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I think this will clear it up, right? Like if you look up the colloquial and like normal usage, the most normative use of the term phobia, right, is going to say an irrational fear of something. Whether you're using the technical definition or the like average colloquial definition, is an irrational fear of something. And if you're going to say transphobia, for example, right, and you can give an example, like just say some guy said, listen, and if there's any trans people in here, just like I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but like just say I gave the example of like some little kid saying like, they legit are like just they don't want their dad to like cut his penis off or something like that, right? In that case, it's not an irrational fear. I mean, you could say that's a rational fear, right? But you see the problem with that, right?
The thing is, that's not what phobia means. Like,
it is in every case.
The dictionary definition of it doesn't. And just because there's colloquial terms of something doesn't mean it negates.
And the technical term is used that way.
But the thing is, but the thing is, a phobia. But we do use phobia for its other definitions. That's a thing.
Rarely it is used in that way.
But we do use it for transphobia. So, like, the thing is, just because you're used to being about fears and stuff, doesn't mean that it's always about fears.
Well, this person's definition.
Do you think like hydrophobic materials are like afraid of water, or like I don't know what? Like,
what did you say? What was it?
Do you think like hydrophobic materials are afraid of water, or do you think like that like over time we use words that don't come from our language?
Hydrophobic means repelling.
Well, okay, it doesn't. When the part that we're having an issue with is that he said you're right. We keep focusing on the fear part. Let me ask Contender. Yeah. Are you talking less more about the fear, but rather the irrational sense of whatever thing they have against that person? It's not rational. They're not thinking of things rationally.
Yeah, so I'm saying that phobia is used in common language and in the technical literature as an irrational fear. The other person above Dr. Phil said but their definition they gave me was fear.
You could get rid of the fear part, and it could still be irrational. You could have an extreme irrational ideological setup of that individual that doesn't necessarily have to just be fear.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Because I may have misunderstood what you said.
So, phobia, because you keep going towards fear. A phobia can literally just be you wanting to keep away. Doesn't have to be fear. You could just be.
Yeah, sure. It can be used in that way. Sure, yeah. Just like when Jesus or somebody says, "I am the door," like typically door's not understood in that way, but I guess you could use it in that way, right? It's like it's just not typically used in that way. And my biggest fear is that people equivocate on terms. Right?
Okay, so it's generally so I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and if you disagree with this, then I don't like. I don't know, like I can convince you at all, but it's generally accepted that when you say something like homophobia, you're not referring to people being afraid of gay people. You're generally referring to people being hateful of gay people. That's been the case for the past 15 years now.
What was it? It's not that you're afraid. It's what?
Averse.
Generally being engaging in like hateful behavior towards gay people. For example, it's homophobic.
Oh, hatred.
For example, it's homophobic to like the wedding cake thing. That was like a box standard case of like the owners are homophobic. They didn't want to like lend their business to gay people. Now I don't want to get into the conversation of like
whether that's actually true.
Right there. Wait, bro, you just said it at that very end. That would constitute as homophobic because you wanted to keep them out.
Yes. But
the other part is if you're just targeting them or yelling at them for a particular thing,
that is also
more constituted as more like a hate crime, not necessarily homophobic, unless you start using specific things to justify your meaning to keep away from them.
Outside of any academic discussion, outside of like whatever like philosophy like Discord channel you're in, no, like everybody understands that when you call someone an F slur in public, that is absolutely homophobic behavior.
So what about how this? So, for example, I'm gonna just accept your definition.
A stereotype, though. You might start applying a stereotype to people.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys have like ever been called the F slur in public, but yes, that's homophobia. Like, I don't know how to make this like. That's just.
Sure.
Calling someone the F slur in public is just homophobia. That's how we use that word. That's
sure. That's not what I'm referring to. Just like take a general act, right? Like a lot of people say that like Milo Yiannopoulos is homophobic, right? Yes, and by that you mean that he's adverse to gay people, but then he.
No, by that I mean he's engaging in behavior that's
hateful toward them.
That ultimately contributes to like a society that's like.
See, that's what I mean. It just changed. Your definition just changed.
So does the homophobia have to have the hate element, or can it just be something like you avoid gay people? Can I walk away?
It's not.
I gave this definition very early on. So I don't know why this got lost.
I wrote down what you said. Hatred toward on an interpersonal level.
Ignore the words, all right? So just like because I ignore the words and just like engage with the I'm trying to like conceptualize this because again, like working definitions are really hard and I don't think they're very useful for conversations about these topics.
I think they're the most important. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I hope you understand that the F word that you're speaking of is predominantly an English slur or a North American English slur, where it is also found in both Italian and Old French and even Greek.
Yes, and
it means something different as well in English.
Right? What are you talking about? Like.
The issue that I had when we started constituting that like this word is by nature homophobic.
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. I specifically referred to you, like, not you, but like anyone yelling like.
You're saying the usage of it, right?
I'm not. But wait, why did you bring up Destiny? Why did you bring up Destiny then when it came to like a particular argument when Destiny has made the very same
just leave it. Like that's not what he meant. I feel like you're just nipping.
Wait, what did Destiny do? I don't.
That wasn't him.
He has this N-word debate argument that he puts up.
Yes.
So you're okay in that context or no?
Am I okay with him using the N-word?
No. Do you agree with him when it comes to like his explanation as to when he thinks it's okay to be used?
Okay, so I don't remember the specific thing, but like what I took away from it is that Destiny generally has like a different working definition of racism than I do, and I accept that. And I think in his specific case, like he doesn't think using the N-word in private is racist. I personally think.
So long as it's between him and a friend.
Yeah,
anybody should be dictating like what the speech of what he and a friend.
Oh, no, I agree. I obviously I agree. You can't brain police people. Like, of course, I don't know what.
Okay, so then in this case, would you say that the F word, depending on the context of whether it's being used between the friends, would be fine?
Okay, so here again, like, this is gonna like. I don't want to sound like a crazy leftist.
Sure.
This is just like how I engage with these topics.
Yeah, it's not generally like
because I'll admit to this. Like I use the N-word in private as well because I think it's a funny word.
I never used the word.
I'm absolutely aware because I'm absolutely aware that I am like engaging with a level of racism there when I use that word. And I think Destiny is as well, and I think you are engaging with it even between just two people, even just saying it to yourself in the shower. The difference is the level of racism. Again, it's infinitesimally small when you say it to yourself in the shower, but ultimately, it's still like contributes to like even just like.
You agree? Okay, that I understand that you want to give out all these other different examples as you try to trail in, but literally, I was just honing on to the idea that if you have two friends that are saying the F word to each other, are you okay with that?
Am I okay with that? Okay? So again, like this is just like I'm not.
Well, you're okay with doing it between friends. So if it's between you and your friend, could somebody who has their own friend say the F word to themselves?
Okay, so here's one thing. I don't think so because the context that word exists in is entirely different than say the N word.
Okay, now this sounds very.
Selective, yes, because words exist in different contexts. The N-word is not the same as the F-slur. The F, like
why?
even just
I'm gonna fight you on that one. Why is it different?
why is it different? Because the context these words exist in is just.
So you think racism is worse than homophobia?
What? No, there's like.
If you don't think so, then all racist and homophobic acts should just be grouped together. No, I'd say that these are all equal bads.
I don't qualitatively like. There's absolutely no reason to.
But you are. Then why are you selectively saying that the F slur to people is fine, but the N?
Okay. So let's okay. So let me like make these hypotheticals very clear. Okay, so two friends who I don't know saying the F slur to each other, to for whatever reason, they don't engage in homophobic behavior in public. They just say it because they think it's a funny word, and they've called each other that name forever. I have no problem with that. I personally don't use the word because I'm uncomfortable with engaging with that level of homophobia.
What if somebody leaks that info?
What
if somehow it got out that those two people that were saying it to themselves, what they thought was private, somehow somebody got a hold of that information and leaked it out?
Would I be okay with that? Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah, but what you said.
But do you think they deserve repercussion for it then?
Yeah.
Again, like, it wholly depends on because in the specific context that I just presented, it's two friends, and they're like, they do not engage in homophobic behavior in public, and it's very like. Just from the context of them saying these words, it becomes very clear that they're saying it in a friendly manner. They're just like teasing each other.
Yeah, just for clarity here, Mavro, I think I see what you're saying.
Then obviously, like, no, I don't think they should be punished.
So let me just make sure I see what you're saying, right? Because I think
every instance. Okay, let me just like make this clear as well. Again, like what I've basically done in this conversation is already like call everyone present and everybody in the entire world to some degree racist and homophobic, because that's what I believe. The thing is, like, I don't believe that every instance of racism and every instance of homophobia is punishable or even like is bad necessarily, is like morally evil.
I'm not even sure.
So let me just ask if you're saying this, Mavro, just for clarity, okay? Yeah. Say that. Let me give a hypothetical, and you tell me if this is what you meant by people using the F word in private, right? So say that there's two friends and they hang out every day, right? And one gets like like a really like you might say like a fluffy collared shirt or something like that, right? And the other one says, "Oh, you are an F word," right? Is that what you're referring to? Something like that, where they're just kind of playfully saying it, and the other person knows their intention or something?
Okay, again, like that word would exist in an entirely different. Okay, so here's a situation where I think, just to clarify it, where I think that word would have like a comparable usage to the N word. So assume that I don't know, it's like two fucking redneck hillbillies, all right? And in one instance, one of them just
Wait, are you being redneck phobic right now?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So, in one instance, all right. So one of them, so these guys are like generally, very like just stereotypically like they're sort of very masculine. They like you're like fucking bitches or whatever. They're like generally just the stereotype redneck, all right? One of them one day decides to paint their nails in colorful colors, and he comes to work with that. He comes to the factory mill or whatever, and his friend comes up and says, "Hey, what are you, an F slur?" That's in that instance. Now flipping that around to like the N word, here's where I think that uses.
Wait, in that instance, they were or weren't being homophobic?
I think that's an entirely different level of homophobia than, let's say, I don't know, me and a friend using it in private. Yes, I don't think every instance of using a word.
Well, their friends using it in private, though, right?
I think it's. I mean, obviously, it's okay.
So wait, are you saying that that's bad or good? I still can't tell that worker situation with painting
nails. We're not talking law here, right? We're just.
Sure.
No, I still, but just in basic terms, like you brought it up, and I feel like you made no point with it. Like, what were you trying to say?
Yeah, you brought up that example between two friends, and then you said that's different from me and my friend in private using it, and I'm like, how is it different? Because it's two friends in private each.
Which one's better?
Okay, so
which one are you using?
Okay, so what?
I'm not trying to get you. I just really don't know. You just compared two examples, and I don't know.
Okay, so I don't want to insult you guys, but I didn't think I'd have to go to this level of clarification. So, two guys who are like very stereotypically masculine using the word to insult each other has a completely different intent and context than two, like, say LGBT or gay men saying it to each other in a playful way. That's entirely.
So the second group are actually gay.
Now we're throwing stereotypes. At this point, you're trying to throw in stereotypes. You're saying you're basing this completely off stereotypes, which at that point I would find it very demeaning.
Yes, stereotypes, because generally, like, look, LGBT people exist in a different, like, you know, societal state than straight people. So when two straight guys who are like, hey, yeah, fuck bitches, get money, you know, call each other like, oh my god, you painted your nails, what if, like, F slur, you know, that has entirely different, like, that's an entirely different intention and context than, I don't know, like, two gay men being like, oh my god, you're such an F slur, like in a Valley Girl accent or whatever. Like, these things aren't comparable because they're just like.
Okay, I do see what you're saying.
You were going strictly off of their gender and appearance. That's the part where I myself.
Okay, so I'm going off of their gender and appearance because maybe you guys aren't aware of this, but there are a bunch of fucking, like, cishet straight people out there who are very, very comfortable in engaging, like, with, like, homophobic words and homophobic slurs without even, like, remotely, like, thinking about like.
Like what that would mean. Yeah. So
the thing is that you're creating an axiom, and the axioms are supposed to be somewhat neutral in the proposition of a hypothetical. But you're already creating a proposition before the hypothetical, stating that these people, by nature, are this because of this.
Yes, because look, if you're socialized a certain way, we can just use the N-word as an example. If, like, two rednecks, you know, talk about, like, black people, and one of them, like, casually just.
Wait, you're using rednecks again. It's just like, what's the difference between you being,
I don't know, like,
phobic against rednecks?
I don't know, like, two fucking like hoteps or whatever talking about, like, white people and, like, calling them, like, fucking, like, white devils or whatever. That has an entirely different context than, like, me calling you a white devil out of, like, just out of a joke. These things aren't equal.
So let me just get this clear. The two examples you gave, the second one had two gay people in it, so it's not as homophobic. It's not homophobic because they actually
depends on the people, but generally I'm thinking, like, I'm just going to, like, paint the picture of two gay people who are, like, very comfortable with their sexuality. They're very comfortable with their masculinity. They're like aware of the history of the word. They don't use the word in certain contexts. They don't use the word to demean, like, people they don't know. They've used the word with each other forever. Like,
all right,
I can give you more context to, like, clarify when I think the word.
What about two gay people in the case of, like, Milo Yiannopoulos when he got married to his husband or whatever? Whenever he said that, he thinks that a lot of gay.
Whenever he goes on stage and calls himself a dangerous F slur, yes, I think that's homophobic because he's pandering to a very certain audience.
But he is gay. Remember? That was part of your example.
What he's okay, so here's a very, like, this is a very context-dependent case of homophobia, because even though he's gay, it doesn't matter, because what he's doing in using the F slur in front of an audience, specifically pandering to them, is signaling to that audience that, yes, it's okay to, you know, use the F slur in public. Go ahead. Like, you can call me an F slur. You can call every, like, gay person an F slur. It's all okay, all right? Like, speech should never, like, be controlled. Like, we can just insult people however we want, even if they're people who are, like, marginalized. Like, it doesn't matter, all right? So that's what he's signaling. That's why it's homophobia. Is, like, does that make sense?
I mean, I can see what you're saying, but it just seems like your definition has to just broaden every time there's a new case to include the people you don't like.
Of course, because these things are very complicated and they don't exist as much. Like,
right, but then my other problem besides your definition having to expand to encompass everybody that you don't like, after that, I'm wondering the way that you use, rednecks, and then I say, is that redneckophobia or something, just as a joke, and you say yes in passing, and I just wondered, like, ethically, what's the difference between somebody being like, yeah, it's fine to be, phobic of rednecks or whatever, but not,
dog, like,
I'm just wondering, is,
like, 40 years ago, there were, like, fucking people, literally, like, going around schools, like, literally gay bashing. I don't.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or, like, compare, like, I've never heard, like, of an instance, like, of a historical instance of, like, redneck bashing or whatever.
Well, every time somebody gives an example of a stupid person on here, just like you did, they give the example of a redneck. And so I'm just wondering, what's the difference between being phobic toward one person and not another?
The difference is in, like, practice, because in practice, these people, like, a redneck, all right, a stereotypical redneck, does not exist on the same, like, social, like, marginalization as, like, an LGBT person does.
You don't think so?
No.
Wait.
Rednecks are pretty.
maybe I'm super fucking bigoted, and I'll like forever stop like painting like rednecks as like jokingly, sarcastically painting rednecks as like these fucking backwards idiots or whatever. But generally, no.
Do you know a lot of rednecks?
I know 2 rednecks. Yes.
See, yeah. So it's like me saying I know 2 gay people or something like that, right? It's like
What?
they're kind of marginalized for you, aren't they?
No,
They can't be.
I mean, rednecks don't make up that much of the population.
I think you're just falling into a trap that like everybody in some sense is made fun of, but sometimes there's a gray area of like poking fun at a group of people and being racist or homophobic towards that group of people. There is a gray area. Some groups of people, it is just being made fun of. And guess what? Bullying happens in different ways, and sometimes that's also part of the gray part. Is it might just be bullying. Maybe we're just bullying all the fucking rednecks. That doesn't mean we're marginalizing all of them. It's just a gray area between the making fun, poking fun at people, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is racism, and you have a middle ground that could be considered bullying or ill-intended, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it makes that group marginalized.
Yeah, sure, I agree with that. I agree with that for the most part, but go ahead.
Just to come back to your point, on an ethical level, if you wanted to like boil down the difference between homophobia and redneck phobia, if you just like went to the smallest common denominator of those things, then obviously there is no difference between them, because what it amounts to is essentially just one group of people or one person being bigoted towards another group of people. So obviously ethically at the very lowest level, but that's not useful. That's not a useful idea to like.
See, I think it is, because we can hold people accountable across the board. You know, so like if I were to give an example and say, oh, you know, one of those, you know, F-slurs or one of those gays or whatever, and then you were to I was talking to you later and you're like, oh yeah, one of those rednecks that were dumb or whatever, then if at the base, if it's like, hey, we're both using these things in the same way to marginalize a group of people or something like that, I think that is useful.
It's not useful, because like, are you gonna are you gonna go to like an LGBT like activist group in Alabama and like tell them, oh yeah, by the way, I know you're talking about like transgender healthcare at the moment, but like just remember, don't be like don't marginalize redneck people. Like,
no, but if they're walking around in overalls going, dude, look at me, I'm Billy Joe, then I'm gonna be like, that seems pretty insensitive to some of the people. Even if you're marginalized, it's like, what are you gonna do? Marginalize others?
I agree 100%. It would be insensitive, but here's like my take. It's based as fuck to like shit on people who are, you know, not on board with LGBT rights.
Right.
If
you're like,
that's kind of the point. Yes, it's insensitive, and I'm 100% comfortable in engaging in like that level of insensitivity towards.
Right. So that's kind of that was my point from the beginning, right? Because last time I talked to a group of people on here about being bigoted, right? And so I said, like, you know, what does it mean to be bigoted or something? They're like, well, it means to not be open to it. And I said, well, what's your ethical system? And they're like, preference, utilitarianism, or whatever. And then I'm like, so it's your preferences? Yeah, basically. Okay. So I said that what you're basically saying to people that are bigoted, you're just saying that. I said, they don't prefer what you prefer, right? And they're like, yes. And then I say, so basically when you say somebody's bigoted, you're saying they're not open to preferring your preferences, so they should prefer things that aren't their preferences, right?
Okay.
And I think it made a problem.
Super like philosophical, like, you know, like these ethical sort of like definite, like,
we have to be consistent.
I don't even know what to call it, but yes, you have to be consistent.
No, you don't.
You also have to be practical. Like,
no, you don't.
Practicality is 100% way more important than consistency. And I don't give a fuck if I'm like I'm not ethically consistent. I'll admit it here. I'll indict myself. All right, I'm not ethically consistent. Okay. Why should you care about what I have to say? Because generally, I'm a practical person. All right, I care about like the treatment of people in the real world. And if I happen to engage in insensitivity, even though I say to people that they should not engage in insensitivity, then that's on me. All right, that doesn't make the point of like not wanting people to engage in insensitivity mute. That doesn't mean like, oh, well then in that case everything I've ever said about insensitivity must be wrong because I happen to engage
in some inclusive to the people that I want you to be inclusive to, or whatever.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, that is exactly.
It's just inconsistent.
I agree with that. Yes, it's inconsistent because
it's like a Muslim reading their book and just being like, look, right here it says God is all powerful, and then they get to another part where it says that he's really weak, and they're like, that doesn't matter, he's still all powerful. You would see a problem with that, but you don't in your own system.
Are you like comparing people to like a religion right now? I don't even know.
So, can I actually mention something about consistency? Because I'm tired of people like thinking that consistency is the be all end all. I have never once met a person that is consistent. I'm so tired of people being like, you have to be consistent. No, you don't, because nobody fucking is. And I feel like nobody is consistent. You will always be inconsistent at some point. And the reason for that is, let's say you subscribe to like any sort of philosophical school of thought. If you agree wholeheartedly with every fucking premise, there's going to be a time in your life where you wish you didn't. And at that moment, you are inconsistent. Regardless of what actions you take, you are inconsistent because you're no longer happy with the choices that you're making for the sake of consistency. Consistency shouldn't take over you as like a person. I'm so fucking tired of consistency being an argument. Consistency is not an argument. You can't argue for somebody to be consistent when you yourself are not being consistent. Nobody fucking is consistent.
Yeah, I
nobody.
disagree with that. People are consistent.
Orange.
No,
Orange.
Show me a consistent person, and I'll show you God. Like,
so I'll show you.
I'll prove it.
So you can be intellectually consistent within a system.
Well, yes, I'm intellectually consistent.
No, I'm not sure I agree with that. Wait.
Nobody can.
Wait.
What?
So when it comes to, I know that there are some people, especially Destiny, who believes in like these absolute axioms to try and keep arguments consistent. I don't subscribe to that. It doesn't sound like Orange subscribes to that, because when it comes to any given axiom, we saw that with the Richard Wolff versus Destiny debate and the Destiny versus Bosch debate, where they consistently seem to be they're not very consistent with the very points that they provided at the very beginning, or when they provided a hypothetical, it doesn't even be consistent with the points that they're trying to set up.
Your Destiny wasn't?
So the axioms are not always consistent. However, if you're going to provide me an axiom and you try to give me a hypothetical, and I provide you a hypothetical, but you're on the opposite of that axiom you just provided me, then I'd be like, wait, that isn't consistent, which means that you're being a hypocrite.
Wait, so was Destiny inconsistent in those two discussions you're saying?
There were moments where over in like the Richard Wolff debate, he made a slip up when it came to like the dividend portion, and then when Richard Wolff made it slip up, he would complain about it. So yes, there are points in which I'd be like, wait a second.
I watched that part about the dividend thing. I don't think Destiny's inconsistent there.
I have a question. All right.
I saw his breakdown of that. I don't think he.
Here, contender. Here's a scenario, right? Here's a scenario. So, let's say there's there's like these people like exist, right? Like here's like a black trans woman, all right, and she's like speaking on trans like issues, and she's like being an activist, and she's like trying to, for example, in Alabama, like trying to push for repealing like the laws that put in place to improve like or like repeal transgender healthcare. I'm not super familiar with it. I don't want to like get bogged down in the details right now. So just like the hypothetical, right? And she's like, she kind of like has biases towards white people because of like racism she's experienced in her life, and she generally like just unconsciously is like less like more distrustful towards like white people, and also like more distrustful towards like straight people. She has these biases. She's like, sometimes she's like very insensitive when she like talks about these issues to straight people, because they tend to be very bigoted. Do you think that like anything she says is like just not worth anything because she's inconsistent, or?
No, what I would say is that you see, the problem is she's not going to be intellectually consistent. There are different types of consistency, right?
Well, yes.
One will be. Let me just finish my response.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Let me ask the question, and then like you can respond to the first, and then like respond to the question. So, how would you specifically like respond to, her, for example, or a group like that surrounds her, wanting to like push for policy? Like, how do you respond to that?
How do I respond to her pushing for policies?
Yes. How do you like respond to specifically? Like, do you just like say, "Oh well, you're not intellectually consistent, so that means like your policy is kind of mute because sorry, you have to."
Yeah. So I would say this. I would say, what policy are you pushing for? Oh, I'm pushing for this right for trans people. Okay. Why? Because what's the reasoning? Oh, the reasoning is because they're being treated unfairly. And then I say, well, wait a second. You know that nobody else has that right either, right? Yes, I think they should have this special right. And I say, why? Well, wait, I'm just continuing the hypothetical or whatever, right? So your reasoning is because they are treated bad by some people, that they should have rights that no other people have, so that those people are treated worse by them. Well, yeah, that's fine or whatever because I don't have to be consistent. It's like, well, what stops the other person on the other side from going, we should have these special rights because if we don't, then we're going to be treated unfairly or something. It's just like.
Okay, so how about the different scenario? How about like a gay person? Like, let's rewind back 10 years ago. How about like a gay person who, I don't know, calls straight people breeders sometimes, and like is kind of like distrustful of them, and is like kind of hateful to straight people, and he wants equal rights for gay people, and he wants like the equal right to marry. How do you respond to that then? Because like straight people have that right, like everybody else has that right, like just gay people don't. So how do you respond to that?
How do I respond to it?
Yes, how do you like justify denying like that?
Oh, if I'm playing the part of somebody who denies that?
Wait.
No, I'm specifically trying to get you to like how do you like how is so when I say these things are important.
Well, wait, you see exactly what you're doing with that example is you're saying it's inconsistent for people to not let gay people marry.
I want Matt to repeat that hypothetical real quick. Can you repeat that hypothetical one more time?
Okay, so just as like a precursor to this, when I say like I tend to like think more practically as compared to like philosophically. The thing is like fuck, I'm a philosophy student and I want the fuck out because this shit is ruining my brain.
You don't need to get out. You need to stay and think deeper about
it. Thinking practically is a philosophical practice.
It's called pragmatism.
Okay, so when people like want better rights and better treatment for like it doesn't matter.
Let's go with your hypothetical that you gave though about the straight people already have the right to marry, and gay people want to be able to marry, so they call straight people breeders as like a pejorative.
No. Okay, so there's like a gay activist, all right, who's a public speaker, and so this is a hypothetical, all right. Sure, so he's a public speaker, and he's like in private he's kind of hateful towards straight people because of the injustices he suffered in his life, all right? But he's still pushing for like gay marriage, and he like tries to get it passed in the court of law to make gay people like able to get married with other gay people, all right? So he comes in front of like a court of law that absolutely like it's an all-knowing court of law, and that court of law like absolutely can like know everything about him. So you think it would be justified for that court of law to deny him, like to deny that policy based on the fact that he's morally inconsistent? Are you okay with that or
no? What I think he's doing in the first place to try and get marriage for gay people is he's showing that straight people are being inconsistent with their marriage laws. That's the whole point. He's saying that they're being inconsistent and that they should be consistent and let all people have equal rights. And so that was my whole point.
I understand. So if I understand correctly, he was just addressing his behavior, not the law or his own opinion, but the behavior of that person.
Yeah, so that's when I say like being insensitive is like kind of doesn't matter when you're like when you look at the real world, is because people are generally like can be very insensitive to out groups, quote unquote, and you shouldn't like look at the behavior of like single people when they like push for policy or like better treatment of a marginalized group. So
but I'm not sure fighting phobia with phobia is the best tactic to go by.
Nobody's fighting phobia with phobia. Like there's like no swaths of like LGBT people like saying like fuck like straight people, fuck straight people, like I don't know, like take away their rights.
It doesn't exist.
Okay,
so no, matter? He wants let him make up the point. Ankar, what is your point?
Who are you talking to?
I mean, you like, do you want to be a contrarian, or there is like a point what you want to make?
Wait, when it comes to like, there are people that are
people
that would act in a heterophobic way.
Mm-hmm. So like you wanted to speak out against those people that are anti.
I just don't think that if you're going to, I just don't think that when it comes to if you're advocating against a certain type of phobia or just applying yourself to be given some rights, but to immediately enact phobia discharges onto others, I'm not sure is helping the system.
I agree, but was like someone talking about this, or was just
yes, it was Raw, and honestly, we weren't trying to pile on. We're actually trying to understand the person's opinion, so I just want to make that clear, right?
So, again, like my opinion.
Well, first, we were talking about transgender rights over in Germany, and then we got all the way over here.
So again, like
yeah, because we want to know about definitions. That's what we.
This is like still my original initial like sort of point is that trans people in Germany, and like someone agreed with me and said like this is kind of how it is in like the whole world, are kind of invisible. It's gotten better with like homosexual people, but LGBT people are still like by and large kind of marginalized within society. People are still way too comfortable being very bigoted against LGBT people, and I generally want to get rid of that. If I happen to like be insensitive towards like straight like cis people in the process of you know, advocating for LGBT like people's rights and their treatment and like the better treatment of them, then I don't I don't care about that because that's just like something that's gonna happen.
So,
like,
Marfro, one thing here.
I try not to engage with like hateful rhetoric, but like generally, if it happens, like if I happen to like make a joke about redneck people, I don't think that's like an indictment of like my cause or whatever.
Yeah. So one thing here though, like earlier you were talking about things that make that hurt the social cohesion or like upset the social apple cart or something like that, right? As being a bad thing, but
no, again, like I think you like filled in my blanks there.
Oh well, I mean, I could go. Well, I think you did say that though. That when I was talking about the definition of racism.
But like that's
okay. Maybe you don't agree with that. All right, so I just won't saddle you with that if you don't agree with it. But let me just ask you this: don't you agree that there will always be, let's say, I don't want to say. Well, let's just say like unordinary people, right? Whether they're, you know, let's just say there's a group of heavy metal kids, right, that wear like black nail polish and like, you know, all black or something like that, or you know, trans, or like some, you know, anyway, whatever, a group of people that are not the norm, let's just say, right, a small group of people. Don't you agree that there will always be these people? First, and then second, do you think that we should make laws and things based on the exception to the rule and not based on the rule? And that's just an honest question, honestly.
Give me an example.
Right.
That's kind of a like a very obtuse way of phrasing things. Give me like how would that like apply in the real world?
I try this answer.
Yeah, sure, but I would like to hear Mavro's answer too, just because you know.
Again, okay, so like give me an example of like.
Okay, so let's just say, because to take trans and the other things off the table that way, it's not emotional for anybody who's in here, right? Let's just say there's a group of heavy metal kids that.
It kind of is for me, but like.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's take that off the table, so that we can think about this logically and like intellectually. Okay, there's a group of heavy metal kids, right? They start a movement called Metals or something, right? Okay, and these people, they don't like the, you know, normal culture of like how to dress and how to talk, and so they start talking like you know, like, oh, you know, or something. Just, I'm not trying to make fun of them or anything, but just like say there's these metals, right, this group of metals, right, and they come to the courthouse and they're like, yeah, we should have this law that, you know, protects metals from like you know, people being able to like not hire us based on how we talk and how we like dress in all black and like have these piercings in our eyelids or whatever and all this type of like stuff. That's not, I'm not saying that it's immoral or anything like that. I'm saying that it's not normal or it's something like that, right? And what I'm saying is, because we're group species, that we survive in packs and groups, so for cohesion it like promotes survivability and things like that. So anyway, should we make the laws based on the exception to the rule, or the rule if it's going to affect the whole? So when in that case, say that say that they're going to have to take a bunch of money from, let's say, like a school or something like that, taxpayer money, and put it toward making sure that there are these elements in place in the structure that people have to hire a certain number of metals or something like that. Let's just give yeah.
Okay, so first of all, so just like in terms of like exception to the rule, there's something called protected classes, right? Like Destiny talked about the stream multiple of times. Like,
well, no, I'm familiar. I'm just asking you about exceptions.
Okay, so I'm just gonna assume that you're okay with protected classes existing, or are you like kind of like on the fence.
Yeah. I'm not taking a stance on any of that. I'm just asking you the specific question about.
So specifically, you're asking about like about what's it called, like quotas, like higher, like.
Or not just quotas, but making laws based on exceptions to the rule instead of like the average.
Okay, so I'll just answer real quick. So generally speaking, if these metal kids or whatever were like evidently discriminated against, and people specifically like didn't hire them based on like their appearance, and their appearance like wasn't
and their voices and all that stuff,
like running around naked, and they could like still conduct whatever jobs they would do normally, then yes, I absolutely think that there should be laws in place to protect that class, and specifically like as a sort of extension of that, yes, there should be like laws in place that make it so people can't not hire them based on like the fact that they're like metal kids, as like again like as long as they can conduct themselves in an orderly manner and can like function in society as like normal people. Yeah, go ahead, Discorat.
The whole I have a feeling that Contender's article was question was constructed on the premise that people's survivability increases because we are social creatures in groups and to work together like to increase cohesion.
Well, yeah, that's part of it, right? And yeah, you can make an argument that, well, yeah, but if you marginalize one group, it could come back and bite you in the end, like 1,000 years from now or something like that. But that's
okay.
I would rather like that we have like if we look to on a society based on happiness and contempt. I'm sorry, not contempt, but
content.
Content, yeah, with oneself and with the country, instead of like nature, survivability, and such laws. And in that matter, freedom and rationality will be close to the top of what people actually need to actualize themselves and the society. And in the spirit of freedom and rationality, I would certainly promote tolerance on all levels of law and not restrict anyone or enable protection to people from discrimination based on their difference, because we will always have different people that have different preferences, and to not perpetuate any old structures and systems or cultures of oppression, so we can move towards the goal of freedom and rationality. We should not we should protect people.
Okay, but say there's a different type of, say there's an unordinary group of people that arise that are specifically against your preferences, that are specifically against what you think is moral, right?
It doesn't go about morality. It has nothing to do with morality. It has to do with freedom and rationality. Because morality is not objective. Morality is not objective. And we can go into a axiology argument here, but that will lead nowhere. Morality is not objective. So if we base our society on morals, we will fail as we have failed before, and it will live in oppression again.
Yeah. So that's a really easy answer to like just obviously like if your moral system, like specifically, for example, like for Christians, like for fundamentalist Christians, like evangelicals, if their moral system is like, well, gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married because that's like just what my moral system says, then obviously we should promote them like reevaluating their moral system, as long as like what they're morally against doesn't actually like physically, or not physically, but like actually evidently like harm society. And like I think it's pretty self-evident that like gay people marrying doesn't harm society. So in that case, yes, I absolutely like think that evangelicals or fundamentalist Christians should like reevaluate their morals and like maybe come to like the conclusion that they're wrong about things and they should like change.
So it's about harm to society.
It's about, well, in like to an.
Because you could find some guy or some person that could run numbers and be like, well, homosexuality is harmful in this this range of whatever, and like
it's not though, right? So like in practice we can just say it's not. So well, like why should we like not allow gay people to get married, right? Even if it's against your
I don't know about that, because I guess a Christian could also come back stating to public schools, saying that it seems to be very inappropriate that religion isn't being taught in schools.
Right.
What does that have to do with gay people?
But see, that's the thing is, said that they don't need to be consistent. That was why I said consistency is important, and they disagreed that, well, it doesn't matter about consistency. That's the whole point, is that it's like Vosh said on stream one day, something like, well, no, it's not immoral when we do it, but it's immoral when they do it. And I was just
Okay,
kind of
so,
like, okay.
okay, so
what are we talking about here?
It's not about like. So when you're talking about like LGBT rights, it gets really frustrating when you're like trying to advocate for certain things, and then like there's like, someone comes along with like a philosophical argument about well, is that really okay? Like do you like apply all the standards across the board when like all you really want to do is like give gay people like the equal rights to marry? And that's like it's just
Well,
like
don't
very
people do that for
frustrating.
everything? Like, say you're a Christian, right? And you go
Yes,
into an atheist room, and they're like, "Well, wait a second. You said this on page 3, but what about on page 298?" Like, people do
again,
that
like
for everything.
like it's not comparable because like gay, like people like not having specific rights or being mistreated in society is not comparable to like you like a group of people like sort of like speaking out against like whatever like moral system you have. Like gay people, like being gay is not a moral system, all right? Like being trans is like not an ethical like
Okay,
foot
well,
like
try telling that to the Jews.
yeah. Are you here to proselytize, or are you actually? Because this is like an intellectual like server. I mean, I'm sure you're not here to just proselytize your ideas, because I think majority of people in here already agree with you. So
well, no. So initially, I just came in here because I had a conversation with someone who was very obviously like a right wing nut job, and I just wanted to like, I just want to like confirm.
Wait, was that the guy you were like?
You're safe. You're safe here. Don't worry about it. We all love gay people.
I would like to ask a question. Maybe like it would kind of solve a little bit like or shed some different light. So how does everyone feel about constitutions and why they are important for?
Bro, what? We're talking about gay people.
Yes, but like constitution has a pretty huge role here, in my opinion, which would be like to, you know, allow people have certain rights, independent on the government, the policies, the moral stance of the culture, or anything. It's like it can be overturned. Yes, it can be changed, but it is something much more basic. And if someone can see the connection here of why constitutions are important, so that certain rights and liberties do not get taken away.
Oh, they both left.
Yep.
Damn, I guess I owned them too hard, epic style. Like
No, he didn't want to talk about law. He wanted to talk about philosophy, which I'm pretty sure what he was talking about was not based on ethics or morals.
Yeah, but he was talking about like constitutions and stuff, so I was like, okay.
No, the other guy was, but the one who started the conversation wanted to talk about like the philosophical grounding, which wasn't. It was very, very surface deep. That's why we were so stuck on definitions. We were stuck on the disparity between bias, because he had a bias, or they have a bias, because I don't know their pronouns. They had a bias on a particular instance where they were adversely affected, and because of that, it makes them want to push for this very cause. And the fact that we were able to come to the fact that he's okay with saying things himself, but not necessarily okay with that everybody else does it within the certain meanings, because of the fact that if they look a specific way, or if they're gendered a specific way, then they think that they're inherently going to be doing something bad.
Under common law, you mean?
No. Philosophically. This is where I said is like by the philosophical groundings of your moral axioms. It's very hard to even get anywhere if you're not even able to at least ground your position, because your position is all over the place. He was showing DMs about somebody who he thought was a transphobe.
Whoa. Did he like have that username to ban him?
Sadly, I don't remember his name. Oh, it started with an M. May. I have no idea.
Neighborhood transphobe.
All right, sorry, I'm back.
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Yes, sir. I had to call my son real quick.
Contender, do you remember the other guy's name? Started with an M.
Which one? Oh, the person that with the black and white that we were all like talking to.
Yeah. Would anyone be willing to hop in voice chat with me? And some of us did, and there was some ran into some contention.